Hello and welcome back to Suspended Foundation. I'm your host, Dennis Patholkis, and this is Watchmen, Season 1, Episode 2, Martial Feats of Commanche Horsemanship. Now, what the fuck that title means will become apparent. Well, not really so by the end of this, but I'll get into it at some point. So let me get a little bit of business out of the way as usual. If you like what you see here, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, a like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you want to know when I'm gonna be on live again next, you can hit the bell down below. If you've already hit the bell before, don't hit it again. It will unclick it. You can go to the bell settings, get as many or as little notifications as you want. You can also go to my website, suspendedfanimation.com, and see the schedule up there. I replace it every Monday. I also put that up on my Facebook page as well. There's a Facebook group page which you guys can post stuff and talk amongst yourselves. I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram, and I also have a Patreon page. I don't have any tiers set up as of yet, but I will at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, something like that. Right around that cusp there, since I have a couple of weeks off. So let's get into this. Spoiler alert, I am going to spoil the episode. If you have not seen the episode, go and watch the episode. Come on back. This will be a video you can comment down below in the comment section. Thank you again, Viking Bitch, for the brand new paddle. I was going to say the brand spanking new paddle, but spank, spank, spank. All right. So, for those of you who don't watch the show regularly, what I normally do is I do a recap first, a very quick, well, not fairly quick, but quick enough recap, and then I go into the review. Sometimes I, will review some stuff in between there. One question: does episode 2 make the show feel like Watchmen yet? No. Word 789, you're never going to get Watchmen out of this. I kind of realized so Damon Lindoff, before I start everything here, Damon Lindoff was not involved with Confederacy, which was an HBO program that was supposed to be an alternate take on what if the South had won the Civil War and into today's modern times. There was so much backlash against it that they canceled that. As what happens with a lot of stuff that studios do when they've spent enough money and they've put that they put that time and effort into it, they kind of try and shoehorn it in with another property, like a well-known property like Watchmen. And a really classic example of this is 12 Monkeys. 12 Monkeys was never about the movie. It was really a show called Splinter that was done by the guy who created the Connor Chronicles, which is a great show, by the way. And 12 Monkeys actually turned out to be a fantastic show as well. But it was originally this show called Splinter, and they took the two and melded them together. I'm fairly sure what this show is Confederacy Reborn with Watchmen. Yeah, sprinkled just enough Easter eggs for the fans. Well, not really. Not enough Easter eggs as far as I'm concerned. So they keep going back and forth on this as to whether or not this follows the comic or the movie. And it doesn't follow either one, quite honestly. It borrows from both. And they being the producers of the show are not being forthcoming as to which one they are borrowing, which one they are basing it on. And it's kind of like Damon, it reminds me of Lost all over again, where they are not thinking things through and they are just kind of writing this as they're going along. Yeah. So calling it just Watchmen is kind of misleading. I agree with you, Words 789. Huge fan of Watchmen and Watchmen comics. I was, around when that whole thing came about in the 80s and how big of a game changer it was. And if you go back to my Saturday morning blast off, I talk a bit more in detail about how misleading this kind of stuff is and why they're doing it. So if you go back and take a look at it, I know it kind of rambles. I'm kind of rambling in that Saturday morning blast off, but I do make a couple of good points, which was brought up again in another article by uh, Comic Book Com, I believe it was, or comicbookreader.com. I can't remember which one it was. And they also have picked up on it. and it's a new kind of trend that is sweeping through where you're not getting real comic book stories anymore. You're getting comic book in name, but they are watering it down completely in order to appeal to, as um D&D from Game of Thrones said, they basically made it for housewives, for mothers, and NFL viewers. Yeah, Monday Night Football viewers, and that's what they kind of based Game of Thrones. They toned down the fantasy in Game of Thrones to appeal to those kind of people, and that's what they're doing with comic book movies and comic book shows. Luckily, Doom Patrol is not one of them. Doom Patrol is probably the most comic show I've ever seen, and also Legion as well. Those are the first 2 I would say are the most comic book I've ever seen. So, with that said, let's get into Watchmen here. So we go back to World War One, and we see this typing pool of women, and one of the German guys comes out and asks if he asked one woman if she is fluent in English, and she is, and he tells her to bring her typewriter in, and he starts dictating a piece of propaganda that is going to be dropped from the planes in World War One on black soldiers, getting to tell them to basically stop fighting the Germans because in Germany, as he says, black people hold prominent businesses, prominent roles, prominent jobs, things like that. Whereas in the United States, they are looked down upon and held back and on all of this. And we see the little boy from the first episode. His father is one of those in the war, and he picks up one of the pamphlets and puts it in his pocket. And then we see the little boy. He's putting on his dad's jacket, and he finds that piece of propaganda in his father's uniform, and he's reading it. So, and then we go back to where we left off in the episode with Sister Knight arresting the old guy who's got Judd Crawford strung up, by the tree there. And she brings him into the bakery there, and she wants to know who the hell he is. First she goes into her little room and just starts beating on the walls because of course she's getting her grief out as to what happened with Judd dying, of course. And then she asks who this guy is, and he says he's the one who killed your chief of police. She goes, yeah, I have a hard time believing that. You're like 90 years old. He goes, no, really, I'm about 105, or I'm 105. And she says, he tells her that he used his mind power to kill Judd, which she goes, yeah, that's bullshit. And he goes, well, maybe I'm Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan can take human form. And she's like, yeah, I don't think so. And she wants to know who he is. In the meantime, he's made a cup of tea for himself, and she ends up bagging the little cup that he used as evidence. He's got his DNA all over it at that point. And she gets a page to call into the station, and she does, and she gets word the chief's been found dead, and she basically plays along that that's the first that she's heard of it. And you know, that's when she leaves. So we see a newsstand and two people talking at the newsstand, and the titles are on the New Frontiersman, which is actually the propaganda paper that Rorschach was reading way back when in the first Watchmen movie, and also the comic. It says global squid fall baffles scientists. So obviously these squids that are falling from the sky, these squid rainfalls, are happening all over the world. No one knows why it's happening. And we see this little girl. She picks up a stack of magazine and newspapers, and I guess she does it every day. And the newspaper guy goes, "Does she read all that all the time?" And she goes, "Yeah, she reads all of them." So I don't know where this is playing in, but it might. So this story jumps around so much and doesn't explain anything at all, which is very misleading, and also at the same time very frustrating. You don't even get some characters' names. Like the guy with the Ward, who works for the cops, who wears his shiny face, is actually called Looking Glass. They haven't used his name other than Angela at one point in the episode calling him Glass. That's it. And it's frustrating to try and follow this, to tell you the truth. I know there's a lot of people that are going to like this just because it is all over the map and it's mysterious, but it's not coherent. Quite honestly, there isn't a frame of thought, a through fair. How should I say this? There isn't a linear thought in this at all, and I'm fairly sure they don't know where this is going. Kind of like Lost, same thing. They didn't know where it was going, and they never planned anything out. Which I have a feeling that's where we're going with this as well. So getting back to this, Sister Night gets to the scene where Judd is hanging and meets up with Looking Glass, and he gets in the car with her and asks what she thinks happened, and she mentions the Seventh Cavalry, and then Looking Glass goes, she asks him if he suffered, and Looking Glass goes into detail, like extensive detail about all the stuff they found, and yeah, he was alive pretty much till the end and suffered greatly, kind of thing through the hanging. And then he starts asking questions about because he heard Chief was out at her place the night before, or that night at a party, and asked if he was drunk, and then if he was high, and then she told him that yeah, he did some coke, and almost like he's kind of interrogating her. And before she kind of gets on him and goes, am I supposed to be, are you interrogating me now? And he goes, why do you feel this is an interrogation? And before it can go any further, this guy in a moth suit drops from the sky onto the hood of her car with a camera. And Red Scare grabs him and throws him to the ground and crushes his camera. And we see that there are moth cameramen flying around and they're using disruptors in order to get them to come down and then crashing their cameras. And Red Scare is just pretty pissed off at this point, and he wants to know. Uh, so Sister Night tells him, to back off, and and he goes, "Are you in charge?" She goes, "No." He goes, "Well, who the fuck's in charge then?" No one knows at this point. They don't have, since everyone's pretty much anonymous now. No one knows who's in charge. Yeah. So Sister Night ends up grabbing Chief's body. She's going to pick him up, so that they can bring him down. And then she flashes back to Christmas night with Cal and them dancing when she hears someone out in the house. And she throws him to the side, and a 7th Cavalry guy breaks in and starts firing at her. And she unplugs the lights and basically just starts fighting this guy. She's in the kitchen with a knife, slits him open from groin to chin, and she gets hit with another blast from another 7th Cavalry guy who comes in. And she's trying to get her breath and yell out to Cal, and he's the guy standing over with a gun, and she passes out. But then wakes up in the hospital to see the chief there. She sees Judd there. So no one knows how, she doesn't know how she survived that, because Judd doesn't even know. He basically tells her that everyone else in the force is pretty much dead. He's also got a gunshot wound to his shoulder, and that the 7th Cavalry knows who they are. He knows all the cops. They know all the cops' names, their addresses, and their faces. And so a lot of people are resigning. And she's like, I'm not going to resign. There's no way. And he's like, well, I'm not either. And he says the media is calling this the White Knight, or White Night is what they're calling it, because pretty much everyone was attacked on Christmas Eve. And her partner and his wife were killed in bed, but their children survived because Topher, the oldest, took their daughter and the little baby and hid in a closet. So, yeah. And she is not showing any kind of emotion to this. And Judd's kind of concerned. She goes, there's crying later. She goes, I can mourn later, kind of thing. She's like, right now I'm pissed. And she wants to get in, So we flash back. So we go back to the present now, and Red Scare is basically calling for them all to go to Nixonville and bash some heads in and get some information, get some info out of these people. And she tries to talk him down out of it, and he's like, no, we need to go and do this. And they end up going over to Nixonville. And Nixonville is basically a bunch of trailers and this giant statue of this cartoony statue of Nixon, with the hands raised and with the victory thing out there, and Red Scare is on his megaphone, telling everybody that they're going to come out of their trailers and they're going to go to the paddy wagons, or they're going to rip down the effigy, the statue of their idol, as he puts it. And he gives them to the count of 10. He's counting down from 10, and finally, by the time he gets to 2, someone throws a bottle at him, and that's when he calls the cops in, and they go in and just start tasering people and knocking people out and taking them out. And Sister Night and Looking Glass both aren't getting involved in this. They're standing off to the sidelines. And Looking Glass even says, he goes, you're sitting this one out? She goes, yeah, I'm sitting this one out, until some guy swings a baseball bat at her. And then she beats the fuck out of him and then just sits on top of him and starts beating his face in. And then she goes and sits in the car and is kind of hyperventilating there for a little bit. So she ends up going to this place called the Greenwood Cultural Center, and we've found out in this world that Robert Redford has been president for the last 30 years, and we keep hearing of Redfordations. So what Redfordations are the controversial reparations for slavery and things like that. Actually, Robert Redford, as president in this timeline, has made what's called Redfordations to people. And a lot of people, of course, are opposed to it still in this world. So she's going to the Greenwood Cultural Center, which is a DNA. You can get your DNA scan to find out if you were a member of the if you apply for Redfordations, if you are can be accepted for that. And she poses as Will, because it's an automated system, and she puts the saliva from the cup inside that little machine, and to find out who he is. 40 more years, yeah. So when she gets home, there's some guy, and some guy is actually the actor named Jim Beaver from Supernatural. I know who he is. I've seen him in Supernatural so often. And he says he's there to visit the kids, is what he says. It's his day. I guess he lives out in Nixonville. And she's like, can you take a rain check? And he goes, well, I can take a real check. And so she writes him a check, and he goes off about, Redfordations that must be nice, that she can use her Redfordations for something. And yeah, he's just being an asshole, of course. So Cal and Angela are talking about Will still being at the bakery. Of course, he knows about the old guy Will, and then he asks her if they're safe, and she goes, "Yeah, they're safe." And she goes, "I would tell you otherwise if we weren't safe." She goes, "I would definitely tell you." And then she wants to talk to Topher about what happened, and she goes up to Topher's room, and he's building a floating metal building. It's like some Legos that actually float and they click together and all this stuff. And she tells him, we both experience everyone wants to say this world is sweet, nice, and lollipops and all this stuff, and we both know better. We've had evil stuff happen to us. And she goes, I just want to let you know that your Uncle Judd is dead. And Topher has no emotion whatsoever. And he goes, well, he was a policeman and policemen die. And besides that, he wasn't my uncle anyway, my real uncle. He goes, but can I tell my sisters about it tomorrow? And he goes, I want to tell them. And she's like, yeah, okay. And then he asks if he can watch TV. She's like, all right. So everyone, we see them watching this thing on TV called The American Hero Story, which has a very lengthy disclaimer about how violent it is, the nudity, misogyny. I mean, there's a list of stuff that keeps going on and on and on. I actually thought it was kind of, it got to the point where it was almost funny because of the litany of stuff that they were warning people about, and that absolutely no children should be watching it. And of course, who's watching it but this 10-year-old Topher that's sitting there right next to Cal on the couch watching this. And we also see like the 7th Cavalry people that are building what looks like bomb vests, things like that. And Angela is leaving. She's actually going off back to the bakery to, actually, she's going off to Jane Crawford's house, I should say. And so that starts off with a dead guy narrating his life story. And, first he says, well, I'm dead. This is me dead. This will be the last picture anyone takes of me. And he goes, "But let's go back to the beginning." And we go back to the 1930s, and we see a robbery being stopped by this guy in what looks to be kind of like a purple Klan hood. If you take a look at the thumbnail that I have for this video, that's actually the guy. He's got a red cape with a noose around his neck. And he says, "People keep asking me who I am." And he goes, "I don't know who the fuck I am." And he goes, "And I don't know the answer to that." So, yeah, it was kind of a weird aside. Again, like I said, this thing jumps around so often that it's very disconcerting. So Angela goes up to Jane Crawford's house, to give her condolences, and there is a party, I guess, in progress going on for a senator who's there, and the senator actually comes up and says to Angela, he offers his condolences to Angela, but not to Jane, which was kind of weird. And then he says, whatever resources the police need, he can get them for her. And she reminds him that she is retired. She's no longer a cop. He goes, "Oh yeah, I remember now. Yeah." Yes, that is excerpts from the James Hollis autobiography. I know from Under the Hood. They kind of omitted the first bank robbers who were nude, kind of thing. Yeah. So that I got that, Joe. I knew where they were going with that, and we've seen it before, but that's a little bit of Watchmen thrown in for you. Just a a dash of it thrown in. So as she reminds him that she is retired, she passes out, and Jane takes her upstairs to her bedroom, and she goes, "Well, now I get to take care of you for a little while." And she goes, "Just promise me something that when you go back to work, you get the fuckers who did this to Judd." And she's like, "Yeah, I will." And so she gets out of the room, and we see that Angela faked the fainting spell, and she pulls out some owl glasses, like the old, the of the owl from the original movie glasses, and she puts them on. She can see through the wall, and she sees a concealed doorway and something that's back there, like a costume room or something. And when she opens it up, she finds a clan outfit with a badge on it. So it looks like a grand wizard kind of Ku Klux Klan outfit in Judd's size, basically. And we see her go downstairs, and she leaves fairly quickly. Osmandius, in the meantime, is out for a ride, and he stops at a tomato tree. Not a tomato plant, but a tomato tree. And he pulls a tomato down, takes a bite out of it, and squeezes it out. And then he's having another party with his maid and his butler there, and they're singing for "He's a Jolly Good Fellow." And he's like, "All right, get on with it," kind of thing. He's kind of over with it. He wants it to be done quickly and wants to get to the play. And the play is actually how Dr. Manhattan came into being. It's very shoddily done a bit, very rushed and very superficial, if you will, with Mr. Phillips playing, of course, Dr. Manhattan, and the maid playing, of course, Jane. And we get to the point where he is going, he actually needs to borrow Osmandius's watch, the one that he gave him as a gift for the production. And he goes into the booth where he's supposed to. We'll get to Jenny Slater in just a little bit, Joe Career. Um, we end up having him go into the booth that's supposed to be the transformation where he gets stuck, and Osmandius pushes a plunger, and it lights the room on fire and kills Mr. Phillips. He screams, and it kills him. And then we have a nude guy come down who's painted blue, and he's got a fencing mask on, saying that he is now Dr. Manhattan. He has been transformed and all this kind of stuff. And we have people playing music, and they all have hoods over their heads. So they can't see anything, which is very weird. And then when it's done, we find out that all these people take the hoods off, and they are all the same. So all the males look like Mr. Phillips, and all the females look like the maid. And uh, so of course they're all clones at this point. And basically Osmandius says, "Okay, we'll take Mr. Phillips out and put him down in the cellar with the rest of them." And he goes, "Oh, wait a minute." And he cracks open Mr. Phillips' fingers and grabs the watch. And the maid asks, "Oh, master, does that not work anymore?" And he kicks it, and he goes, "Nope, It's still working. The watch is still working. Yeah. The Vate scene takes place 1 year after the one in the first episode. Yeah, I realized that, defect. I knew that it took place a year later. It's just kind of a weird, again, like I said, nothing is really explained in this. They they kind of leave you to your own devices to figure out what this world is, what has happened. Nothing is really planned out and nothing is really explained to the audience, which is very disconcerting to tell you the truth when you're trying to find your way around. It's like stumbling around in the dark in this thing. So Angela comes back to the bakery and find that Will has unlocked himself. He went across the street to the grocery store, grabbed some stuff, and came back and is making himself some eggs. And she goes, "Wait, you left and then came back?" And he goes, "Yeah, because I needed to get some groceries. I needed some eggs." And she gets a phone call just then, and she goes, "Well, wait, why didn't you leave?" He goes, "Well, I've got friends in high places." He goes, "I don't have to worry about what's going on here." And then she gets a phone call, and it's from the cultural center, and it's a canned voice, of course, that says that the DNA results are back, and she wants to know who the relatives are that Will is, related to, that are still living, and she mentions her own name, and of course, she is his granddaughter. He's her grandfather, which kind of shocks her, and she hangs up the phone. And she goes, "Why are you here?" And he goes, "Well, I wanted to meet you and show you where you came from." That's what he says. She goes, "You know what? You're under arrest." And so she takes him outside and she lifts him into the car and puts him into the car. He's in a wheelchair, of course. And as soon as she closes the car door and goes around the back to put the wheelchair in the trunk, something falls from the sky, a gigantic electromagnet that jumps onto the top of the car. We see a light like from an owl ship above him, above the car, which picks up the car, and he's smiling the entire time, just kind of looking at her, and the car gets taken away. And out of the sky drops a pamphlet, that propaganda pamphlet, that on the back of it says, "Look after this boy," which we saw in the first episode. And it floats down to her, and she's like, "What the fuck?" And that's pretty much where we leave off on the episode. Um, Again, I don't know where to go with this series, to tell you the truth. We are all over the place on this series. It jumps around both in narrative and then not telling us, they don't give us a frame of reference. And the time jumps do not help either. The flashbacks, especially when you don't have a frame of reference of how this world came to be or why it came into being. And yes, I know they're supposed to be basing it on Watchmen, but is it the movie or is it the comic? Is it both? Why is it both? Yeah, this is shit that you need to set up. Again, like I said, world building 101. To leave it to your own audience's devices to figure out what's happening is really a no-no. And yeah, I'm not digging it, to tell you the truth. Just on the world building end of it. The other end of this is, like I said, folding in, yeah, the on-off switch is always an option. I realize that, HR. I know you can always turn off what you're watching. It's not that it makes me feel uncomfortable or anything like that. It's not anything like that either. It's just it's frustrating trying to figure out what this world is without any explanation, you know? Um, it's almost like they should have had a primer. That first episode maybe should have been a primer for this world and then move into stuff like this. That would have been a little bit easier, I think, or maybe even just spent 10 minutes in the first episode to give us a little bit of what was happening in this world to set it all up and then leave it with that. I mean, an origin story, if you will, of what happened with this world. But we didn't get that. And that's kind of a disservice to your audience at that point. You're keeping your audience in the dark intentionally, and then jumping around from time to time, and you don't know what time you're in. Quite honestly, when they were doing the World War One, it literally took me the first minute to realize that they were on World War One. Maybe they said it or something like that, but I might have looked down to write something in my notes when it happened, but damn, you know? And yeah, sometimes I'm not the most observant on some things, but for the most part, I catch a lot. And yeah, this really needs a little bit more explanation and world building than what we got. That said, and then also your characters too. Name your fucking characters, man. Don't just have them start speaking and not calling each other a name or calling themselves nicknames or anything like that. At least we found out Red Scare was called Red Scare. So yeah, that's pretty much the only one. And I think Sister Night, we finally found out she was called Sister Night and Angela. I, yeah. Yeah, exactly, HR. You liking this episode? Who's liking this series so far, I should say. I am still middle of the road on this one. It can go either way, quite honestly, and I'll see what happens next episode. I have a 4 episode rule. It basically, if I don't like it, or if if I flat out am just bagging on the episodes, for 4 episodes in a row, then I will shit can it, and I won't cover it. I'm not going to do any kind of hate uh reviewing of these things. It's just not worth it. I'm just gonna have to say no to this pollution. Somewhere there's an Italian guy dressed as a Native American. Nice, HR. Funny. Yeah, that's true. He was Italian, wasn't he? I forgot about that. Yeah. I really don't know where they're going with this or what they're trying to do with it, and I don't know if they know either. To tell you the truth. Uh, yeah. And if they're trying to do a political commentary on stuff, I don't know if they're doing a good job of that either, to tell you the truth. Um, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I don't hate it, but yeah, I can do without it. I could take it or leave it, quite honestly. It's not grabbing me. I'm not really caring about the characters, to tell you the truth. Um, the characters, I have nothing vested in them, and this is 2 episodes in. I don't really care about Angela's character, which I'm sure that she's the one we're supposed to be following, we're supposed to care about. Okay, yeah, she looks like a badass. She can fight. That's great, you know? But yeah, I'm not, you know, getting there or anywhere with this at all. Looking Glass, same thing. He always wears the mask and he's always eating, which is just weird. So I don't know. Pretty much the only one I like, and that's we haven't even seen much of him, is Cal, her husband. To tell you the truth. And we've got the least amount of coverage on him, which strangely enough seems to be the most comprehensive because he's always at home with the kids. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I saw the trailer for next week's episode, and someone asked what happened to Jenny Slater, or yeah, not Jenny Slater, but Janie Slater, and you'll find out next episode. Yes, because she's no longer the Silk Spectre. Silk Spectre 2, I guess it is. Or no, excuse me, that's Jupiter, right? Is her name? Yeah. She is actually an FBI agent now. Ejar says, so I'll watch your recaps if you continue, but I think I'm checking out of the broadcast version of the show. I think I'm done with them, or I'm just no longer the audience for it anymore. So yeah, Ejar, the thing is, this is not the comic. This is not really based on the comic. They are, again, using the comic as a cover, which is what DC Comics seems to be doing. The same thing with Joker. Joker is really a remake of the King of Comedy, but it's covered with Joker paint. Is really what it is. And like I said, I think Watchmen is pretty much Confederacy, and it's covered with the Watchmen to make it to bring in an audience that normally wouldn't have seen this in the first place. Um, yeah, the pretty much the audience is they're trying to build something around. They're trying to build an audience by bringing in, like, again, like I've said in Saturday on Saturday, they're trying to bring in an already pre-existing audience by how should I say this? They're trying to do it by false means. They're saying it's one thing when really it's another. Bait and switch, I believe, is the name of the term on that one. And like I said, I think it's the show Confederacy just redone as the Watchmen. Mark the Guy, Fat Man Beyond show compared Joker as listening to a cover band. Yeah, I agree with that, Joe. That is actually pretty much it right there. It is like listening to a cover band. But wouldn't those people tune right back out? Some would, Pen. So it's a shotgun effect, Pen, is what this is. So what you're doing is you're aiming for that audience, and sure, you're gonna knock out probably like about 75% of that audience once they see it and they realize that it's not really the Watchmen, but you're still gonna have 25% of those viewers in. And then you're gonna have other people that are gonna come in because of the content and not knowing anything about the Watchmen to begin with that are outside of that audience. Yeah, just for curiosity's sake. I agree with you, Renz. It's not even cop drama. It's this bastardized kind of thing that isn't Watchmen. It really isn't the Watchmen. I don't know why they shouldn't do their own thing, quite honestly. I agree with you, Jar. If they had called it something else, not based on existing characters, something new, I might watch it, but I'm disappointed in their act of theft and misdirection. Um, yeah, they should have just called it something else. Because I mean, bringing Osmandius into it, bringing in Silk Spectre, who's now an FBI agent, into this. I don't know where it is, and supposedly Doctor Manhattan's supposed to be brought into this too at some point in time, and that Dave Gibbons actually signed off on this. They must have backed up a dump truck full of money to his door. That's all I can think of. Exactly, Renz. 2 episodes in, 7 more to go. Yeah, it's only 9 episodes, which is really kind of also mind-boggling too. It's not even 10 episodes. It's 9, which is really weird. I might just stick through it to the end just to see where the shit show goes and just call it Tulsa. Yeah, you could have just called it Tulsa. You could have called it alternate reality world. Something like that. Because you didn't even need to have the whole superhero aspect of it. You could have still gone with, cops are being targeted, so they end up having to conceal their identity. And yeah, you could have done it that way. I mean, it's happening in Mexico right now. It's been happening for decades down there, 2 decades down there now. So didn't need to bring in superheroes into it or make it Watchmen. But then you wouldn't have gotten Osmandius or Dr. Manhattan in it. Anyway, yeah. And I agree with you, Renz. Like I said, I don't know. I don't care about these characters either. And terrible world building, exactly. Everything I just said. So, yeah, where the government set off an experimental bomb that created some metatypes and created new hated classes of people. You mean kinda like the X-Men? Uh, yeah. Alright. So enough bagging on this. Um, I am going to let you guys go at this point because, where am I at on time here? Yeah, I'm at the 40-minute mark, so I might as well wrap it on up. If you like what you see here, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Also, if you want to know when I'm going live again next, you can hit the bell down below. You get a 50-50 chance of YouTube actually notifying you if I'm on or not. If you really want to know when I'm on, just go to suspendedfanimation.com and take a look at that. You can see my schedule up there. It's also on my Facebook page. I have a Facebook group page as well where you guys can post stuff and talk amongst yourselves on that Facebook group. And I have a Twitter and Instagram, and I also have a Patreon page, but I don't have a tier set up as of yet. And by the way, I just want to say what was really kind of cool. I did Mr. Robot about an hour ago here, and I posted it on Twitter that I was going to do it, and BD Wong liked my tweet, and I was like, "Fuck yeah!" Love BD Wong, great character actor, and yeah, I was very surprised by that. I just happened to look at it in between setting that up, and I saw that he liked it. I was like, What?" Because I actually had tagged him on that, and I try and tag a good majority of the actors when I can remember what their addresses are, and that was also just pretty damn cool. So tomorrow I'm gonna be off. Tuesday is gonna be, Is It Worth My Time? And it's gonna be Living with Yourself. That is the Netflix series with Paul Rudd. And Wednesday, I'm off. Thursday is Feelings and Hallways, where I talk about the DC CW shows for the week. And Friday is Titans Season 2. Saturday is Saturday Morning Blast Off, which is always a lot of fun. Then we come back around the horn again to Sunday with Mr. Robot and Watchmen. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there was actually a little thing, on tonight's Mr. Robot where he talked about how, Mr. Robot came along at a perfect time in his career where he wanted to branch out and try something new, and White Rose was the perfect vehicle for that. Yeah, and, yeah, he's very incredible in that role. I can't watch The Leftovers, Joe. I tried. I really did. Uh, yeah. Yeah, and I keep forgetting to mention, the very first appearance of BD Wong, or one of the very first appearances, is in Karate Kid Part 2. He actually runs up to Daniel's girlfriend, in Okinawa because he knows her and tells her about a dance that's happening. And it's a very young BD Wong. It's really funny because I happened to see it. It was playing, I forget, I think on IFC or something like that, and I had it on, and I saw that part, and I'm like, "That looks like BD Wong," and then I had to look it up on IMDb, and I'm like, "Holy shit, it was BD Wong." So, yeah, it was kinda interesting that that's one of his first performances, is in Karate Kid Part 2. Yeah. So with that said, if you're still on the fence about subscribing as well, you're going to see up here a video pop up in this section that basically uses the algorithms of all the stuff you've been watching and plucks one video out of my vast video library that matches that algorithm and plucks it up there for you. Up here is going to be Mr. Robot. I'm going to put Mr. Robot right there for you guys that I just did because it was good. It was a lot of fun. So, yes, Hellboy is coming to HBO. Joker. I'll watch it again. That was actually fairly good. Thank you, everybody, for joining me tonight in the chat. Thank you if you made it this far in the video. And thank you to all the subscribers again out there. It keeps growing. I love it. Please post your comments in the comment section. Let me know what you think, what you're interested in, all that kind of stuff. Also, come to the Facebook page as well. If you've got Facebook, tell me what it is that you're interested in. Introduce yourself and let me know. I read all that stuff. I respond back to you guys all the time. So it pops up on my phone as, notifications. And thank you, Renz. Yeah, I'm reviewing a lot of stuff. I review movies, TV, all kinds of stuff. I'm trying to branch out and give you guys a lot of variety of things. I know that a lot of people are into a lot of different stuff out there. I try to be as well. Sometimes my view narrows on some stuff. I realize that, and I try and branch out as much as possible. Yeah, remember I went to Comic Con. That's an in joke for you at home there. It's I mention Comic-Con all the time. Although who knows if I get in, this next year or not, because damn, I didn't get tickets yet. So we'll see if I get in the next round. Good luck on that one. Thanks everybody. Yeah, no Farscape reviews. I can't watch Farscape. I'm sorry. I just can't. I tried. I watched the first season and yeah, just wasn't for me. Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna let you guys go. Have a good evening and don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. Otherwise, you may get caught in a squid fall, whatever the hell that is. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.